reviewing the January 2018 Watchtower Study Edition for the week of March 12th through 18th. This is the JW Review. So before we get into this article, I want to touch on something that some commenters raised from the last podcast, which was related to the memorial. So a lot of people are asking directly to me, Mike, do you partake when you go to the memorial? So a lot of people know this and a lot of people don't, that I've never been a Jehovah's Witness. So this is a question that I think next JW might answer differently than the way I might answer it, and that's fine. So for me personally, no, I am not planning on partaking. I have never partaken at a at a memorial. I've gone to many, and I do plan on going this month, although my wedding anniversary is on March 30th, so we'll see how all of that actually works out. But I don't plan on partaking, and I don't recommend that you partake either for several reasons. One of those being, I think you're just going to cause unnecessary offense to those around you. I think when you do partake, you're going to close the door to some conversations that you might have. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen in every single circumstance. Maybe it'll open up some conversations. I just have heard so many stories about people choosing to partake, and then Jehovah's Witnesses around you just kind of look at you with maybe some frustration. So that's one reason why it may not be a great idea to partake. But the most important reason as to why I don't think you should partake, or at least for me personally, why I am not partaking, is that I don't believe this is actually a Christian ceremony. So, for example, if you went to, and put yourself in my shoes for a second, if you went to, let's say, a Mormon worship service, would you partake there? Well, some of you still might, but think about it. Think about the theology, or better yet, the worldview that is that's really underlying the whole worship service of the memorial. Whether you're at a Mormon church or a Kingdom Hall, think of the bedrock, the foundation, what's behind it. If you're at a Mormon gathering, you have to understand the fact that they actually do have a different God than what I understand it, and what many of you, I'm sure, would understand, a different God than the Christian God. Because the Mormon God was once a man who lived on another planet and had a God before him. And it's possible that the Mormon God might have even been a sinner at one point. So this God is finite. He is fallible. He's a different God. So think about that in terms of underlying their whole worship service. So when they pass around the bread and the wine at a Mormon church, which I've never been to, by the way, you're partaking of a completely false religious system and a false God. And even with Jesus is the spirit brother of Lucifer in the Mormon church. So think about that as well. You have a different Jesus. I would kind of put the JWs in a similar description. In some ways, it's even worse. Now, it's not that Jehovah, within the Jehovah's Witness system, is a man who once lived on another planet. I'm not suggesting that. But think about the underlying bedrock, again, with the theology of the Jehovah's Witnesses and how it's related to the bread and the wine. Right? So, because what they're saying is, it's how they present the bread and the wine. It's not so much the actual objects, but the theology behind it when they present it. It's the context. So what they're saying is this bread and the wine, this represents the new covenant, through which none of you, or almost none of you, unless you're one of the anointed class, none of you are in the new covenant, right? And so we're passing this around, this very, very, very exclusive way of describing the bread and the wine in the new covenant. So none of you, we're passing this around, none of you are in the new covenant, none of you are born again, none of you have Jesus Christ as your mediator, and the list goes on in terms of the exclusivity of the bread and the wine. And we could say many, many more things about it, but I think for those reasons, they're presenting an unchristian and disobedient, especially, service, or a context by which only some of those people are going to partake. So, would you partake of bread and wine if it's in a non-Christian context? Well, I don't think you should. So I'm going to leave you with that. I think there's more that we could say about that. Now, if you do end up partaking, I'm not going to judge you. I understand why you might. And if you do partake this year, share with me what exactly happened. In fact, it'd be really cool to get some of the different stories if you want to email those to me, whether you partook or you didn't, and kind of what transpired. It'd be really interesting to read some of those accounts, and maybe I can offer some thoughts. So if you do remember, feel free to shoot those stories over to me, and you can contact me through my website at michaeljfelker.com. So I'll stop there with that, and I'll go ahead and get into the review. So I did bring up that section regarding the memorial in this podcast because this particular one on this article, I don't think it's going to be that long. It's regarding giving, or as some Christians would call it, tithing. But the Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't think, necessarily call it tithing to where it's always a 10%, right? I could be wrong on that. I haven't honestly investigated this a ton to see what the perspectives are. I mainly just wanted to review this particular article and the things that are raised. So let's go ahead and start with paragraph 3. It says, Jehovah has access to unlimited resources that can sustain his earthly creation. However, he still invites his servants to use their material things to support the work of his organization. So when you are giving as a Jehovah's Witness, you're giving to the organization, and you're expecting the organization to responsibly handle your money. But the claim here is that God is inviting you to give your things, your material things. That's oftentimes your money, but it can also be your time or your material things, to give to the organization. And make no mistake, this is talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses that's run by the governing body. So do these scriptures here support what they are actually saying? And they quote here from Exodus 36, verses 3 through 7. So let's read those, and also Proverbs 3:9. Let's read those and see if that supports what the Jehovah's Witnesses are saying. Exodus 36:3 says, They received from Moses all the contributions which the sons of Israel had brought to perform the work in the construction of the sanctuary, and they still continued bringing to him freewill offerings every morning. And all the skillful men who were performing all the work of the sanctuary came, each from the work which he was performing. And they said to Moses, The people are bringing much more than enough for the construction work which Jehovah commanded us to perform. So Moses issued a command, and a proclamation was circulated throughout the camp, saying, Let no man or woman any longer perform work for the contributions of the sanctuary. Thus the people were restrained from bringing any more, for the material they had was sufficient and more than enough for all the work to perform it. So the context here is in the Old Covenant context. This has really nothing to do with the New Covenant context that we are all in today. And that's one thing you will notice when you look at what the Watchtower is saying. You see so many references to the Old Covenant. Because in the Old Covenant, yes, you did have an organization that was run by a leader. In this case, you had Moses, or other times it might have been King David later on. But nonetheless, you do have an organization of sorts. And so you do have instances like this where the people gave their things to be used for the congregation of Israel. So no argument there. But again, how does this apply to the situation that we're in the new covenant? Well, I don't see how it can. This is not about the new covenant. So I don't know why the Watchtower cites verses like this, except for the fact that the Watchtower has this concept of organization. And they try to parallel that to the Old Covenant, to where we have a similar thing going on today. But as we will see, there is no scriptural support for that idea. Well, let's see if Proverbs 3:9 has anything to say about that. Because what we should expect to find is something to where we can apply it in the new covenant context to the idea of giving to the one true organization. Proverbs 3:9 says, "Honor Jehovah from your wealth and from the first of all your produce." Nothing there whatsoever about giving your things to a particular organization. There's nothing there about that. Paragraph 5, and this is the last sentence in that paragraph, it says, "Likewise today, unselfish giving in appreciation for and in support of the work of the earthly part of Jehovah's organization is a fundamental aspect of worship." So this is really, really huge, because if you're choosing not to give to this one organization, then you're missing a fundamental aspect of worship. So it is required that you give your money and your things and your time to this one organization. And it doesn't matter if the organization is flawed. Because when you have money and you have people, you're going to have a flawed system. It's not going to be a perfect system. Okay, and everyone should agree with that, whether you're a Jehovah's Witness or not. So it's possible that you're giving your money to an organization that may be handling it poorly. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you can't email someone from the headquarters and ask for a financial statement to where you can see everywhere that the money is being delegated. I don't think that you can do that. Now, I know for me, I could go to my local church and I could ask for a spreadsheet to find out where all of the money is delegated. I can ask, I could probably find out what people are getting paid who are on staff. So I think you should have full transparency in terms of if you are in a church or if you're in some kind of organization like the Jehovah's Witnesses. I think there should be full transparency insofar as where the money is being delegated. I don't think you can get that information for the Jehovah's Witnesses, because I think you'd be surprised to see where the money is going. And I'll give you one example. Think about all the legal fees that are currently being paid or are probably going to soon be getting paid, because all of the scandals that are happening, especially with the Royal Commission in Australia. So all these legal battles that are happening with child molestation cases. I wonder how much money is actually being spent on that. I would assume it's going to be a lot. And but I don't think that's something that you can find out. I think you are just expected to trust that the Watchtower is being good stewards of your money. More on that in a second. Actually, more on that right now. This is this is kind of flows from that thought. So paragraph 12, it says, "With prayerful consideration, the governing body strives to be faithful and discreet with regard to how the organization's funds are used. The funds that are received are budgeted and spent accordingly." So they quote here Matthew 24:45. So let's look at that. You all know this verse. It says, "Who then is a faithful and sensible slave, whom the master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time?" One thing you'll notice here about this is if the Watchtower is saying that this is has to do with being a good steward of the money that's provided to the faithful and discreet slave, who's the one who determines, and when is it determined that that one is a faithful slave in terms of how he's handling the money that's being given to him, and is expected to use that money appropriately for the cause of the kingdom? When does that happen? Now, it doesn't really make much sense to say, well, the slave is already determined to be faithful before he's had a chance to show himself as a good steward of the money. That doesn't actually happen until, look at what verse 46 says. Blessed is that slave whom his master finds doing so when he comes. So the slave is not judged as faithful until the master returns. So when the master returns, he looks at the slave and looks at how the slave has handled these matters. So this is all assuming this is talking about handling the money. The master is going to look at the slave and say, okay, you've been handling the money faithfully, or you've been handling the money unfaithfully. That can't actually be determined until the master comes. It's presumptuous for the slave to say that I am the faithful slave right here, right now, and to say that before the master actually comes. So the Watchtower here is contradicting the words of Jesus, because it says the governing body strives to be faithful with how the organization's funds are used. The funds that are received are budgeted and spent accordingly. So what they're saying here is, we are right now wisely handling your money, so give to us and trust that we're going to do it right, because you're trusting in Jesus, because Jesus trusts us, so you should as well. That is, in essence, what the governing body is telling you. At the end of paragraph 12, it says, imitating the examples of Ezra and Paul, our organization today follows strict procedures when it comes to handling and spending donated funds. You're just expected to believe that. Because once again, there's not full transparency insofar as how the funds are budgeted. Because I don't think you can get an in-depth spreadsheet, and if there is, I would love to see it. So you're just expected to trust the faithful and discreet slave, who they've already judged themselves to be the faithful and discreet slave before Jesus has declared them to be the faithful and discreet slave. The end of paragraph 15 reads, we often hear them say that after watching the monthly programs, they feel close to the members of the governing body. Now they are prouder than ever to be part of God's organization. Now this is in the context of talking about how the funds have been used to fund the JW broadcasting, which are very highly produced programs. Why would they say that they feel close to the members of the governing body? That just seems like such an arrogant thing to actually put in print. That people are feeling. Why wouldn't you say that as a result of the JW broadcasting, you feel closer to Jehovah and Jesus Christ? Why wouldn't you say that? Why use this language of feeling close to the members of the governing body? These are just fallible, error-prone men. They're just men, just like you and me. So why would you actually say something like that? That's just such a strange thing to say. Paragraph 18. Jehovah dignifies us with the opportunity to support the grand work of taking place today. He guarantees that we will receive blessings when we give in support of the kingdom. And the quote here, Malachi 3:10. So let's read Malachi 3:10. It says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house, and test me now in this, says Jehovah of hosts. If I will not open for you the windows of heaven, and pour out for you a blessing until it overflows. So what they're actually saying is, that if you give to the organization, you're going to receive a blessing as a result. Now, I don't think this verse actually applies to today. This is a specific promise to the Old Covenant people of Israel. This is not a promise written to the Christian congregation. I would love to see if there's actually a Christian scripture that says this very thing, because what you're going to find is when you look at, and this isn't just the case for Jehovah's Witnesses, this is also, I think, a mistake that many non-Jehovah's Witness Christians make, is that you should give, and then you're expected to receive a blessing on the other side, or just in this life, not necessarily the other side in terms of your eternal state, although I think that is actually true. But this is where people expect to get a financial blessing in return. And the Watchtower isn't explicitly saying that here, because it does say here after that sentence, Jehovah promises that the one who gives generously will prosper. So to be fair, I don't think they're saying that if you give $10 to the organization, God is going to give you $20 in return. I don't think they're saying that. So this critique right here, right now, is more for just Christians who think that you will actually get money in return. And my refutation of that is that the Christian scriptures don't actually say that. This is an old covenant promise for an old covenant people. This is not a new covenant promise. I've got to stress that. So this doesn't actually prove the concept of tithing in the new covenant sense. Now, am I saying that you shouldn't give? No, I definitely think that you should give. I think you should give of your time, your energy, your physical resources, your stuff, your money. But I don't think you have to give that to a particular organization. There's no biblical requirement for that. I think you should be free to give your money to those who you think actually need it. So that could be to the poor, to charity organizations, and things like that. Or maybe you know of missionaries in other countries. I think you should be willing to give to those. And you should be able to freely be allowed with your own conscience to choose to do that. But the Watchtower is saying that you need to give to this one organization and trust us with your money. But you will not find one scripture to support that idea. So I will end with that. So thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. For more information about Jehovah's Witnesses and other topics, please visit michaeljfelker.com. There you can also reach me directly to submit questions or comments to be covered on the JW Review. To subscribe to this podcast, please go to iTunes and search for the JW Review.